Hey everyone, it's Wasim here from the channel Handsome Smiles. I hope you guys are doing well. Thank you for joining me on another video. Today I'll be doing the 5th episode of this mini-series and the last episode of this mini-series, where I talk about great fragrances from a decade. So the first episode was talking about great fragrances from the 70s, and then I moved on to the 80s, then the 90s, then the noughties, and now the final decade I'm going to be talking about is the 2010s. Now, like the other videos, the other episodes of this series, it's not an extensive list. I'm not talking about every single great fragrance from that decade. I'm just highlighting a few in that decade which I considered to be great, and naturally the list or the fragrance choices of the decade that I'm choosing are biased towards my tastes. So 2010s, I'll be honest, there's not many fragrances out there which really wowed me or impressed me in this decade, especially after 2015. I was talking to a fellow subscriber to the channel. He mentioned in the comments in my 80s video where he mentioned the 80s was one of his favorite decades for fragrances after the 2000 until the 2015s, and I sort of agree with him. The 2000s to 2015 was a great decade for fragrances. After that, the fragrances, especially from the designer game, really fell away, and I think maybe it's down to the release of Sauvage by Christian Dior, and possibly even Bleu de Chanel, which was released earlier. I think that those two releases just sort of disrupted the designer market, especially the men's designer game, where a lot of fragrance companies are now trying to come out with very similar DNAs of fragrances, all using the ambroxan sort of note or a blue sort of note. Even, for example, Dior, they released in 2020 the revamped reformulation of Dior, and gone was the iris, and they released a fragrance which is very similar to me, to my nose, like a blue fragrance, like Bleu de Chanel. So it's very disappointing. There's not much creativity, I don't think, in the designer game. Niche as well in recent years has been quite disappointing for me. Like when I walk into Harrods, if I'm ever lucky enough to be in London, I feel like a lot of the fragrances, the niche fragrances, are so expensive, and they're trying to always cater to the Middle Eastern Arab market rather than the Western market. A lot of the French brands, the niche brands, they're trying to bring out a lot of fragrances which appeal to rich Arabs, and I feel like fragrances now are really missing the creativity and the uniqueness that we used to get in the past. But anyway, let's get this list started. I'm going to be talking about 5 fragrances. There were other fragrances that are considered to be great in this decade as well, but unfortunately I don't have bottles of them, so I'm just highlighting these 5 which I think are great. And like the other episodes, I'm going to go by release date. So starting off, this decade is going to be a decant that I've got, and it is Aventus from the house of Creed. And we're starting off with a bang, like they would say. So Aventus by Creed, I mean, what can I say that hasn't been said already? This is a truly iconic fragrance. Many people consider it to be a masterpiece. I do as well. It's insanely popular. The DNA of this fragrance has been replicated and copied by so many fragrance companies, so many clones out there. But the original from Creed is a terrific fragrance. There's a lot of cult following for this fragrance. A lot of people talk about batches, batch variations. Is it a pineapple heavy batch? Is it a smoky birch heavy batch? There's a massive rabbit hole in terms of Aventus. Like Bleu de Chanel and Sauvage, that were massive hits, this also was a huge hit. Aventus, it was such a hit where the Creed company made so much money that they were able to open up a store in New York. So that's how much they sold of Aventus. And I feel like Aventus sort of ushered in the other niche fragrances to also try and create really commercialized fragrances. Rather than going for art, they were going for sales. I feel like this sort of Aventus sort of ushered in that sort of mindset for companies. Even Creed now, look at their newest releases. Nothing is as good as previous decades. Talk about Bordeaux Portugal, Green Irish Tweed, original Vetiver, original Santal. They used to bring out really unique, very pleasing fragrances, but the newer fragrances are trying to just become commercial hits like Aventus was. So the DNA of Aventus, how does it smell? It opens up on my skin very fruity. I get this pineapple and sour apple sort of opening in the opening stages. As the fragrance develops, it's joined by like a smoky woodiness. It's a mix of like a smoky woodiness and pineapple. The DNA is so familiar because so many brands are now copying it. But when this came out, this was truly very unique. In terms of performance, this one on my skin is beastly. It lasts around 10 hours, projects very strongly as well. Like people that are far away from me, they're able to detect me. And this is one of my absolute like biggest compliment getters as well, since I've had this in my collection. I've got two 50ml decants. This one is pretty much finished. I've got another 50ml decant, and that's going to do me quite good for a few years, which is why I've not bought a bottle. I've seen some good sales for bottles on Facebook groups, but because I've got a decant, I've not bought a bottle myself. In terms of seasons, Aventus is like a Swiss Army knife, works in every single season. Summer, spring, autumn, winter, it works really well. Works pretty much in any occasion as well. It can be suited up formal events, and I wear it to work. Night out fragrance, you name it, this can be worn on any occasions. So the first fragrance we spoke about is Aventus from the House of Creed, which was released in 2010. Okay, moving on. Now we're talking about a fragrance which was released the following year in 2011. It's from the house of Thierry Mugler, and this one is Pure Havane. So Pure Havane, released in 2011, the perfumer behind this, as well as all the other Amen flankers, as well as the original Amen, is Jacques Huclier. And this is a flanker of a flanker. So it's a flanker of the Amen or Angel Man, which was a flanker of the original Angel, which was a fragrance for women. And the original Amen, which was released in, I believe, 1995 or 1994 or 96, one of those 3 years. It was very iconic of its time. It was a great fragrance of the 90s. It was a fragrance which had a lot of gourmand notes. So it had patchouli, it had vanilla, it had like a milk note in there, surprisingly. It had some coffee. Now you get that same DNA, but you get it in this form. You get the same DNA in this, but you get the addition of honey and tobacco. And those 2 notes give this a really unique fragrance. So the opening is a blast on my skin, a blast of honey, very sweet honey and tobacco. The tobacco in the opening is quite harsh. I remember when I first bought this fragrance, I think it was 2011 actually. I bought it in the release year. It was the summer where I ordered it online, and I remember this because at the time I was fasting and I saw a delivery at home. I opened up so excited. I sprayed it on my hand and I smelt it, and it was so bad. Like I thought I made a complete bad decision doing a blind buy of this fragrance. I hated the opening when I first smelled it because the tobacco was so harsh. Now on subsequent wearings, the opening, once it eases after a few seconds, it becomes very, very pleasing. So the opening is very harsh on the honey and the tobacco, but as a few seconds later, within minutes, it becomes sweeter, and I get this lovely cherry note in here. So you get this fruity cherry note mixed with the tobacco and the honey, and in the background, as fragrance develops, you pick up patchouli and you pick up a little bit of the vanilla as well. It's like the name suggests, Pure Havane. It's like going to Havana, say in Cuba. It's got that sort of vibe. Sort of has that vibe of, say, being in Miami and smoking a cigar. That's the sort of vibe that you get from Pure Havane. So it's like a cherry tobacco sort of cigar. I remember once, I believe I was about 16, me and my brother, we went to a cigar shop and we actually got some cigars which tasted like cherry. and it was on Eid day, and I smoked a little bit of the cigar, and I got a massive head rush. Even though it tasted so amazing, I got a massive head rush, and I nearly collapsed because I was just not used to smoking. So yeah, fun story. But Pure Havane, unbelievable fragrance from this decade. This is my bottle. It's pretty much half empty, and I've got a large collection. And I've had this since 2011. So it's going to be a sad time when I finish this fragrance, because from what I understand, this has been discontinued. A terrible decision by the brand. I can't believe they've discontinued this. But yeah, in terms of performance, this is outstanding. Lasts really long on my skin. I'll get about 10 hours with excellent projection. So yeah, Terry Mugler's Pure Havane. That's next on the list. Okay, moving on. So this is the third fragrance we're going to be talking about. This one was released in 2012, and this is a flanker to a 90s fragrance called Declaration. This one is Declaration d'un Soir. It's from the House of Cartier. So the original Declaration was created by Jean-Claude Ellena. I believe Jean-Claude Ellena, yeah. Jean-Claude Ellena, the gentleman that created Terre de Hermes. And this one was created by a female perfumer. I think her name is Matilda. I've forgotten her name. I think I've not written it down. But she was the in-house perfumer at Cartier. So how does this fragrance smell? So this opens up with a lot of spices. I get some fresh spices. So I get some pepper, I get some cardamom, I get some cumin in the opening. So it has this really fresh, bright, spicy opening. And as the fragrance develops, it's joined by a gorgeous floral rose. The rose in this is outstanding. If you have one Rose 31, I would say it's similar in terms of genre. It has fresh spices and rose, but where Rose 31 plays an equal part, the rose plays an equal part to the spices in the woods, in the dry down, in the musk. This one, the rose really is the center stage of this fragrance. It's like a fresh rose fragrance. Don't think of this one like being a jammy rose or a overly sweet rose. Don't think it's like rose that you get in Lyric Man, Rose d'Arabie, More Than Words from Xerjoff, those jammy sort of rose fragrances which have a bit of oud. This is like a fresh rose, like a gentlemanly rose scent. This is a fragrance which really can be someone's signature fragrance. It's quite office friendly, I feel, as well, because it has that freshness. It's a fresh scent with a touch of warmness from the spice and that gorgeous floralness, which gives it a little bit of a rosy sweetness. There's a touch of muskiness as well that you get deep into the dry down. Performance wise, this is quite good on my skin. I get around 8 hours with okay projection. It's not going to project massively, but it gives you good projection, moderate range. It works really well as a work scent. Can work really well as a date fragrance as well. That's Cartier's Declaration d'un Soir. Okay, let's move over to the fourth fragrance, and it's also from the house of Thierry Mugler. This one was released in 2013, and again I bought this on release year, and this is Pure Malt, but this is the Creation edition. So I'm not sure why they made a flanker of a flanker of a flanker, but this one was the Creation edition. I remember being watching YouTube at the time in 2013, and I used to watch so many videos, and everyone at that time was just hyping up Pure Malt, Pure Malt, Pure Malt. You know, you had Robes, you had Cutlass Supreme SL, you had Reggie. All those guys were just hyping Pure Malt like crazy, and I wanted to get my hands and my nose on Pure Malt. But at the time, it was discontinued, and even at that time, in say 2012, 2013, it was selling on eBay for ridiculous prices. And when this was released, Pure Malt Creation, I thought it was actually Pure Malt. I didn't even read it properly. I just saw Pure Malt and it was available on Thierry Mugler, and I just quickly bought it from their website and I got it. And I thought this was just Pure Malt. And it was only after a few years I was just updating my Fragrantica, and then I realized this is actually Pure Malt Creation. So I actually owned Pure Malt. I bought it off a Facebook group years after having this one. and I felt like they were pretty much identical, about 90% of the same. But I got better performance of this one. The original Pure Malt had a better whiskey note, but this Pure Malt Creation has a little bit more on the fruitiness. So how does Pure Malt smell? Similar to Pure Havane, they both have the original Angelman or Amen DNA, the patchouli, coffee, vanilla sort of vibe. So Pure Malt Creation opens up. This takes me back. It gives me some nostalgic vibes. I've not worn this one in a long time because I've just been trying so many other fragrances, but this reminds me of being a young man in my early 20s during that time. It opens up with warm, like sweetness. I get like a caramel in the opening. There's also some fruitiness. The fruity aspect of this fragrance is a little bit on the synthetic side, but the other notes in here really are gorgeous, like the caramel. There's beautiful vanilla in here, patchouli. It's got all that angel DNA, but added with that, you get the fruitiness and a sort of a booziness as well, a fruity booziness. A beautiful scent, which for me is the perfect sort of date fragrance. This is best worn during the winter, I feel, as a nighttime scent. I love wearing this to at the cinema. It's got this cozy sort of feel. It works well as a sort of a playful night out fragrance as well. Definitely a great fragrance for this decade, and again, unfortunately discontinued by the brand. That's Thierry Mugler's Pure Malt Creation. Okay, moving on and talking about the final fragrance. It's from the house of Christian Dior, and for me this is I'm gonna just say it, I feel like this is a modern masterpiece. This one, it was released in 2017, and this is Sauvage Parfum. So there used to be another pure Sauvage Parfum which had a black label, which was released in 2012, and this was released in 2017 as a reformulation. The prior version of this one, the Parfum version, was also created by the same perfumer, Francois Damachy, but that one was very heavy on the benzoin and the myrrh note. This one was reformulated by the perfumer because he wanted to create a version which was more similar to this version that was released in the 60s, but just has a little bit more sort of performance, or being more of a Parfum version, so to speak. So this one and the original one, that was the original Parfum, which was released in 2012, I believe, or 2011. The difference that I get is that one was a lot more deeper and richer, very resinous, and I felt like that was a great fragrance for like the nighttime. It had a very beautiful nighttime sort of resinous sort of feel. However, this one is a lot more brighter, and I feel like works really well as a daytime scent with added projection and longevity that the original 60s version didn't have. So Eau Sauvage Parfum, how does it smell? It opens up with a beautiful blast of citrus. The main citrus notes that I get in the opening is the citron, and along with that I get a gorgeous elemi. Now elemi has this sort of a resinous feel with a smoky sweetness, and the sweetness that I pick up from the elemi smells like licorice. So it's got this gorgeous green licorice sort of smell, along with like a gorgeous citron citruses. As the fragrance develops, it starts becoming a little bit more smoky due to the elemi note, very resinous, and it picks up a touch of woods as well, but it keeps this green sort of freshness throughout. I'm not sure how they did it. This is a very strong fragrance as well. You want to be sparring with the sprayer. I feel like less is more with this one. Once I did a lot of sprays. I did about 5 sprays of this one, and it really choked me out, and the scent was so overpowering that it put me off for a long time. And then I picked it up again, and then they did just a casual 2 sprays as my night scent of the night, and then I was just like getting whiffs of this fantastic fragrance, and made me fall in love with the fragrance again. So you want to be sparring with the sprayer. Don't spray too much. Like I've mentioned, very strong on the projection. Longevity wise, excellent as well. I get 8 to 10 hours. I feel like this is a proper gentlemanly fragrance. which works in so many different situations. You can wear this to work, you can wear this formally, especially. You can wear this on a night out, there's no problem. It's a Swiss Army fragrance, and it's a scent which gives off the smell or the vibe of somebody having a lot of money. When I wear this, my wife does say, you smell like a rich gentleman. That's the sort of vibe that this gives off. It gives off like a rich aristocratic person. That's the sort of vibe that this gives. So that's Sauvage Parfum from the house of Christian Dior. So there you have it, guys. That's my selection, 5 great fragrances for the decade of 2010. Today's episode was the last episode of this mini series that I was doing, where I spoke about fragrances from each decade. I guess the next episode would be great fragrances from the 2020s, the decade that we're in now. I guess I'll have to do that review when the decade finishes. So I guess I'll see you guys in 10 years for that video. I'm not sure how my life will be then, if I will still be reviewing, how fragrances will be in that decade as well. It'll be an interesting time. Let's see if I'm still around during that time. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please do leave me a like and a comment below. I love reading your comments. Please do let me know about any great fragrances from this decade. I've just not been interested about fragrances in this decade. I've just been reading and trying to hunt down older bottles, older classic sort of fragrances. I've just been more on the indie side with my oud and attar. So if there's any great fragrances from this decade, please let me know in the comment section below. I'd love to check them out. If you haven't subscribed, please make sure you do. I'll be trying my best to bring out some great content as well. So yeah, until next time, my friends, see you later.